Hi, guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non Muslims to handle Islam in the 21st century. My name is Mustafa, and this is my co host in the nick of time. If you wish to talk about Islam, the ideology, you have come to the right place. We cover current Islamic news, Islamic scripture, some crazy comments, and a weekly topic about Islam to examine, critique, and analyze. If this is not enough Islam for you, please drop by our Discord to discuss any further questions about Islam. We condemn any form of discrimination, violence, misogyny, slavery. However, we do embrace free speech and criticism if it's factual and correct. Thank you for stopping by and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show.
Hello, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. Hello, Nikhil. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you perfectly fine. Um,
All right.
so, so yes, we have a very interesting topic for today. Um, Sexual diversity in Islam. Is there such a thing as sexual diversity in Islam? Well, Nick and I here are gonna review an article. It's posted by a professor. Now, before I dive in, um, you know what's happening with you know in Iran, that is the protest. Some 12,500 to 14,000 have been arrested. I just wanted to briefly talk about this. The fact that we there there's a story that's been shared that there's a death sentence handed to all of them. However, it's only the parliament that has voted for the death sentence. So it hasn't been sentenced yet, but it's still a dangerous precedent. So it's definitely a very scary situation still, but some facts are being a bit misleading. Um, so we're gonna go to this topic of sexual diversity in Islam. So this is by Professor Scott Siraj Ul. Let me just share the screen. All right, let me just share the screen. Can you see this?
Yes, I can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, so this is from the website Muslims for Progressive Values. So Dr. Scott Siraj Al Haq I think Nikhil, he's a convert to Islam, I'm guessing.
I believe so. Again, I
Okay.
don't want to put words to something that's not true. That's for him to tell his journey. But I
Yeah,
do believe he is a convert.
yeah, I believe he just we call it we tried to invite him, but he seems uninterested at the moment. So basically, this is his background. Dr. Scott, he's a professor at Emory University. He teaches about Islamic culture, theology, and ethics on the topic of gender and sexuality. He's written Living Out Islam, Voices of Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Muslims, Homosexuality in Islam, Critical Reflection on Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Muslims, AIDS, and homosexuality in Muslims. So lots about sexual diversity in Islam, and this is just like also Sultan Mahmud's Makeover, Colonial Homophobia, and Persian Urdu Poetics. So yeah, he does have quite the background, and he does seem. I'll start from the top. So basically, you know, sexual diversity in Islam. Is there room for Islam for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Muslims? So now this is going to be an also this is from 2010. Okay, and it was funded by the Human Rights Campaign. So this is going to be an interesting article because what we're going to do is we're going to critique this article. I know it's going to be. Am I barely hearable?
No, we can hear you perfectly.
Wait, so Ginny says that there he's not able to hear me.
Uh, no, you're on this thing. Let me check YouTube for a quick sec.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
let's
on
do it.
StreamYard, you're actually pretty
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the.
yeah. Let's check on YouTube.
On YouTube, you're
Right.
doing fine as well, so I've
Okay.
just increased the volume. On
Okay.
YouTube,
Yeah.
I had you on full volume as well, so it's
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. So I hope you can see this. Um, so it's a preface from sexual diversity, ethics, and the agenda of progressive Muslims. Uh, so he claims in his claim about that you know there's like Islam is open to homosexuals, um, but he claims that the punishments for homosexuality have no basis in the Quran or Sunnah, and which is a big claim that is he's making. So we're gonna see what he claims, because this is sort of like a question and answer type of structure too. So chapter one, understanding sexual diversity. He says some religions in some religions view sex as shameful or unclean. Is that true of Islam? No. In early history. Oh, by the way, any of you guys can join us. What do you call it? If anybody or one of you wants to join us, you're welcome to join us on this link. By the way, posting. Whoops, not the YouTube link. Whoops, sorry. I'm gonna put the invite out there. How about now, Ginny? Is it okay now? So I think okay. So I had to bring the mic a bit closer. All right. So
oh, you're using my mic.
no, it's just the laptop mic. That is. I still have to set up that
Ah,
mic. I know I've been lazy as hell. Also because I'm doing house showings, so that's why I've been lazy as hell with that regards. So I have to keep my house clean for now. Um, but anyway, so he's like, no, in is that true of Islam? Like, do they see sex as shameful? No, in early Islamic history, sex was seen as a positive part of human life. Muhammad helped people see the spiritual life and sexual life are connected. I kind of agree with this because there's a ton of literature about this stuff. Like, so much sex. It's insane. Like everything, every aspect. Also, hello, Jimmy. It's every hadith is about like sex. Even the what do you call it? When he says, even the Quran, the Muslim holy book, describes heaven as a paradise of a physical kind. Heaven is described as containing rewards such as rivers of milk and honey, which make appealing to the. He does not include the Houris. That's what I noticed. The very first thing I noticed is that he does not include the Houris. So the Houris themselves are mentioned as in chapter 78 verses also in chapter 37 verses 48 to 49. These are companions with modest gaze and beautiful eyes as if they were eggs, well protected. Or in some translations, this is women, damsel, or damsels with lovely eyes. So the eyes are very big. And in chapter 78, verses, actually, also let me just share another screen right here. Present, I'll just put the entire window. Or just the entire screen. No, should I just do window?
so before we get started, let's actually ask Culture Jenny what his opinion is.
I mean, I think it's obviously, in the Islamic traditions that there exist a lot of things that, talk about sexuality and, restrictions upon sexuality and rules with regards to it. Ignoring that is, just wrong. But on the other hand, you could interpret things to, ignore certain hadiths And I'm not here to tell a Muslim that you must believe these things in order for it to be true Islam. That's not. I don't think it's anyone's business to define true Islam. What I do think here is that we can discuss various trends in Islam and what is more mainstream and what is less mainstream, rather than discussing what is quote unquote true Islam.
Yeah. Well, here's what I found. Okay, so I found this the Quranic verse I saved, chapter 78, verses 31. So lo, for the duteous is achievement, gardens enclosed in vineyards, voluptuous women of equal age. But it's also translated as full-breasted companions of equal age. So full-breasted companions, according to Ibn Qasir, is also these breasts are round and not sagging. So
I think it's
sorry, what?
Qa'ibatun or something like that, if I'm not entirely mistaken. This is actually, I remember, was it on this show or was it elsewhere where we discussed, oh, it was an after show, yes. We discussed Majnun and Layla,
and
a famous
Majnun,
poem
yes.
where...
So I wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, famous.
Yeah, Majnun means
series of poems where one of the, she is described with the same word.
Yeah, like rounded and full-breasted, right? So she's described as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is definitely like sexual desire. So he was on point, but I found that he actually missed out on mentioning the Huris. So I feel like he was, because the Huris are a very man-only desire. That's why I feel like he did not mention them, because of the fact that it kind of shows that it's only a man's or an Arabian man of set times fantasy, so to speak. Now he says, is sexuality the same as lust? No, sexuality is a lot more than desire or lust. Sexuality involves desire. Again, I'm not an expert on what's lust and desire and sexual, but it also includes thoughts, acts, and how one sees oneself. It is part of a person's identity. It affects how people relate to each other, but it's also important to realize that desire itself is not such a bad thing in Islam. There's a well-known hadith or story about the life of Prophet Muhammad. He should have quoted this hadith if he's writing this book. Like, at least give us a source, because I tried to find this hadith. And then he said, 3 things were made beloved to me in this world of yours: women, perfume, and prayer. Now, this hadith indicates that sexual desire is something the Prophet cherished. Now, not only did he cherish, I feel like there was also the issue of Muhammad's sexual desires as well. Because I feel like he also ignored the part where he could not control himself. When he saw, there's the story of him visiting his son. His son, actually adopted sons, and the wife is there, Zainab bint Jahash. And Zainab is in less clothing. And he discovers her, and then he starts having thoughts about her. So he has an entire Quranic verse, then there's this whole Zainab, he desires Zainab, and then Zainab sees this opportunity to move up the social ladder. So the marriage breaks between her and Zayd, like the adopted son. And then, Muhammad marries and uses a Quranic verse to justify the marriage with Zainab bint Jahash. So this was, in another hadith, there's so many hadiths I forgot. But yeah, there's another hadith where Muhammad, when he sees a woman, he then comes back home and then he has sex with Zainab bint Jahash. So there is these were some examples that this professor ignored. But yeah, it did show, critics of Islam as critics like us, we see that there is there is a lot of sexuality, just that it shows that Muhammad may have had some sex addiction problems. That is, again, that's the kind of prophet we see him as. Next question he asks is, by the way, you guys can chime in as much as you want. Nick wants me to speak more because I'm from the queer community. So yes, Jenny or Nathan.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
my
I was just
entire view is that we do have the problem with the hadiths not generally being, portrayals of what happened during the time of Muhammad, since they were written several hundreds of years after. Do I think that some hadiths are actually fine? With regards to this, thing, the purpose of this hadith was less to, say that Muhammad was sexually active and probably more to, solve issues with regards to inheritance and
But
adoption.
keep in mind though, Jenny, there's with this, one didn't need a Quranic verse to like say, hey, you can marry your adopted son's wife. And then there's another issue also that I brought up, which was linked to it, was Muhammad seeing a woman not being able to control himself. And then there's also another issue is he has the sexual strength of 10 or 100 men or something like that. There's a hadith by Anas, Malik bin Anas. So there's this, it kind of paints a picture of like, does this man really have, again, does this if you kind of collectively look at it,
I mean,
does this
I'm not saying that I don't say that he wasn't very very sexually active. What I'm more pointing out is that rulers in many polygamous societies where you could actually have a lot of several women, either in the terms of several wives or in the terms of
your voice is cutting out a lot.
Slavery with regards to pleasure.
Yeah,
sorry. What I'm trying to say is that in societies with a lot of polygamy and slavery with regards to pleasure, it becomes natural that a leader like Muhammad is very active.
Of course, but keep in mind, this is a person who claims to represent a god, right? And the way that kind of changes things, it changes a lot of things, because this is supposed to be a messenger of God. He's supposed to represent for all times. So this isn't exactly reflecting all times. And also, our discussion here is sexuality. And the article is interesting that it ignores certain facts that with Muhammad, that is. Also, by the way, I give the warning, Nikhil, that I'm going to be very explicit today. If you have children watching or hearing this, please shut their ears at the mention of there's a lot of dirty talk is going to be happening here today. But yeah, considering the nature of the topic.
Considering the fact that I already talked dirty without the notification, before, you guys can probably understand how dirty it's going to be.
Yeah. My apologies. But yeah.
I'm jaded after all the Arabic poetry that I've read.
Yeah, this is quite. I think you were telling me on Discord it's quite dirty, the Arabic poetry.
Yeah.
And this is a question he asked: is sexuality only considered good if it is used to create children? No. The Prophet Muhammad and early scholars said that sexual play is a good thing, which is actually true. Like, they're not necessarily against sex for pleasure. That is, there's nothing against it. He says following, in fact, one hadith, Muhammad said that God rewards people for sexual play, but he doesn't so quote the hadith. Man, this man needs to quote hadith. Like, the term sexual play is not defined in Quran or hadith.
But doesn't he kill people for sodomy?
Yeah, keep in mind, when he means sexual, sodomy is a different issue. Yes, because now that brings up a separate what do you call it? Because technically that's sexual play too, sodomy itself, and that brings that's a sin. That's considered a sin actually. By
Yeah,
killing,
for those of you who don't know, just before Noah's flood time, the whole world was just, doing sodomy, essentially butt sex.
oh, this
Uh,
was Lut actually, the Lot's time. I think you're confusing
yeah.
the Lot.
Well, no, because
Yeah.
there's a bunch of sins that uh, that the people before Noah had, which were corrupted, and one of the sins being anal sex or
Oh,
sodomy.
that was again not Noah, Lot. Those are different characters because the Sodom and Gomorrah, because that's where the term comes from. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is in
Oh, I
Genesis.
basically, I basically thought that. No, so I know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, hence the name sodomy. They
Yeah,
were having so much butt sex that they had to name the actual activity after the city.
after the city. Yeah.
So I know that, but I was just thinking one of the activities was sexual play that the people before Noah did. What differentiated Noah from the corrupt people of before his time and of his time was that they were encouraging all this stuff. Noah was the only one raw dogging in the puss, as you would put.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Noah story, but I think definitely this is something we can I can look into.
Yeah.
So, did you read this somewhere? Like the Noah's people were having a lot of sexual play.
Yeah, because that's one of the things where they weren't reproducing properly, right? They
Oh,
were
so they were
jolly
having
and playful.
protected sex. That is. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, they were having sex for mere pleasure rather than reproduction. Whereas
Yeah,
Noah was looking at populating.
which is actually the opposite. Because surprisingly, in Islam, you can have sex for pleasure. Technically, there's a
But it
practice
has to be with a slave.
with a slave or wife or slave. That is. Let me show you the
Who are
hadith.
you kidding, Moose? They're both the same.
All right, one second. Let me show you the hadith about coitus interruptus, actually. So, where is it? I think over here. Okay, so I think this is the. No, 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 not this one, not this one. This one's
I like
for.
how you have all the sexual hadiths memorized on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, yeah, again, it's the easy stuff to remember, right?
I wonder how many of those Ali Dava has memorized.
I mean, it depends entirely on what your interests are when it comes to
Quiet, you.
Islamic studies.
Quiet, you. All right. So this is from Sahih al-Bukhari 2542, book 49, hadith 25. So it says here, I saw Abu Sa'id and I asked him about coitus interruptus. So this was a method of making sure you don't come inside the vagina. So Abu Sa'id said, we went with Allah's apostle in the Ghazwa of Bani al-Mustalik, and we captured some of the Arabs as captives. And the long separation from our wives was pressing us hard, and we wanted to practice coitus interruptus. So you see, they already wanted to practice coitus interruptus with their wives. We asked Allah's Messenger whether it was permissible. He said it is better for you not to do so, but He doesn't completely forbid it. No soul, that which Allah has destined to exist up to the day of the resurrection, will definitely come into existence. He said it's better not to do it, even though He doesn't completely forbid the act itself. So this one was very interesting. So this is where where was I going with this? Yeah, so this is where you can have sex for pleasure. If it results in a child, that's on you. But it's destiny. It's God's destiny to say, hey, a child just came out of this. So it is not defined. Yeah, it's weird that sexual play is not defined in the Quran because that isn't that supposed to be the word of God? Um, and he does state sexual play does not necessarily lead to making children. Like I said, the coitus interruptus issue that we just discussed. We also what do you call it? Indicate sex is considered good and healthy. It doesn't state that, but it does state like you can have. There's nothing against it. Um, so in Islam, is it anything goes when it comes to sex? No. Like he's correct on this so far. No, there are limits. Most of those limits have to do with relationship between people who have sex. The limits don't have to have the with the sex act themselves. For example, in Islam, brothers and sisters cannot marry. There are verses of the Quran that specifically mention who can and cannot marry. This limit prevents women and men who are closely related from creating children who might have serious health risks. In Islam, men should not have sex if they do not have a known, clear relationship with men and with each other, which is either master-slave or marriage. This limit helps ensure children will be cared for and supported by both parents, and also slaves there plenty for sexual pleasure. That he ignores. This limit is important for women at a time when men had more opportunities to work for our money. Clear relationships, which is kind of like a historical thing. Clear relationships help people recognize what to expect, what rights, blah blah blah. Now, he doesn't mention. He also mentions like the brother and sister. But Nick, remember Dr. Abdul Patel when he asked him the question about cousin status, because cousin marriage is permissible in Islam. So
Yeah.
he said that cousins are not direct relations, but there
But
is.
doesn't. But isn't there like the closer you are in terms of cousin, the chances
Mhm,
of things like so some genetic disorders nearly doubles, like
exactly,
diabetes, arthritis, Down syndrome.
exactly. And if anything,
Might I add here?
yeah, yeah.
On the first generation of cousin marriage, which is to say that you haven't had cousin marriage, in the closest, generations, one or two, the, then the risks aren't actually that high. It is when you do cousin marriage repeatedly in several generations that it
Mhm.
accumulates and becomes a problem, because the risks the first time are actually, sure, they are higher than regular, but they are still pretty much, you can have actually higher birth defect risks due to, other factors that are, in your environment than due to just that. But
And
it becomes
yeah,
becomes multiplied in by square every time you do it for every generation. That is why it's problematic when it becomes multiple times.
and you when you state that like it's done multiple times, this has been an issue with countries like Pakistan, for example, where cousin marriages for generations. There have been cousin marriages happening for generations, which have led to health problems. Um, so it and yet there's people who insist on cousin marriages are okay when even in Desi cultures or Middle Eastern cultures it's it has been repeated a lot of times. Um, so you are correct. It has to be repeated multiple times. So another question: at the Prophet's time,
Well, one thing I just want to point out is that I've heard some of this stereotype that it is the same as, pretty much having sex with your absolute closest relatives, like your
mhm,
sisters or brothers, or your, fathers and mothers. That's not the case. There is a large difference here in, the dangers of
yeah, yeah, in comparison to cousins, that is like in
birth
comparison,
defects.
yeah, in comparative,
Yes.
yeah. So but with some people, they do see it as a form of incest too. Like some people do, and some people don't. Um, it's like though I kind of give it to the experts to recognize the health risk. Um, at the Prophet's time, was sex only permitted between formally married husband and wife, or I would actually say husband and wives, because there was the limit of multiple wives, and there were multiple wives at the time. Well, 4 wives. No, sex was allowed as part of a number of relationships. Are we mentioning slaves here? Most of these relationships involved a kind of contract. Yes, okay. This is something I forgot too. Agreement. This is called the Muta Agreement. Have you guys heard of the Muta Agreement?
Yeah, the
No.
Shia practice it.
And the Shia
Certain
Muslims,
groups of the Shia.
and this is more common with Shia Muslims, that is. And and he mentions temporary marriages. When slavery was legal, sexual releases, yeah, so he mentions this as well, temporary marriages. Today, we don't think of marriages and other relationships contracts, but many marriages are based on agreement. Some relationship agreements. So he is correct on the temporary marriages. There's also, from Islam.org, about Muta, that is. Again, this is strictly from, whoops, no, I'm not this. I have all these websites open, my apologies.
As long as it's not bringing up Pornhub.com, we're fine.
I assure you that won't come up. I assure you. Okay, so
here is a live evidence of a Muslim, Mia Khalifa. As long as that doesn't happen, we're totally fine.
No, let's keep Mia Khalifa out of this for now. We, it will be a very interesting topic for a future discussion, but let's steer away from that, shall we? All right. So Arab dictionary says muta is enjoyment, pleasure, and delight. So this marriage itself is referred to both in hadith and books of jurisprudence. And this was, the Shia interpretation of 424. Whereas the Sunni interpretation of this is, Sunni interpretation is slaves. Shia interpret this as muta marriage. So, and muta, there also is a practice of muta in Iraq and Iran, mostly in Iraq, where this has become a business of sorts, where girls are literally pimped out in multiple temporary marriages. And many young girls, as young as 9, are exploited in this. So this has become an issue that a lot of Shia Muslims and a lot of countries in general seem to ignore this issue. So this is not talked about a lot, but we should address the muta scandals in future. So now we come to the juicy part. Aren't Islamic rules about sex only about relations between men and women? He's like, not necessarily. The Quran gives us rules for relationships between men and women, but it doesn't set rules for same-sex gay or lesbian relationships. That doesn't mean it forbids relationships between people of the same sex.
Your voice is getting strange again.
Oh, okay. How about now?
Now it's good.
Okay. So there was a number of reasons why Islamic law focused on relationships between men and women. For one thing, Muslims jurists saw straight heterosexual relationships as the major concern because they led to a pregnancy. Same-sex couples may have or raise children, but for them, having children is not an accidental side effect of having sex. So far, I don't know where this guy is going. The early Muslim jurists wanted to avoid situations where a child was born without the support of a father. At the time, men earned the most income, blah. Because of inequality between men and women, having a man in the family helped. Okay, but he's not addressing the issue of the question, that is this only about men and women? Another reason Islamic jurists talked about straight relationship is if they were trying to address most needs of the people. Since most people are straight, their needs were a primary concern. That does not mean other sexualities don't exist. It just also means that it doesn't mean sexual identities are forbidden because they're not. Here's the problem with this guy. Islamic jurists did mention these situations. They did address homosexuality, and there were punishments for this. And what do you call it? Different fiqhs, for example, there are punishments. Let me just share some hadith. Actually, no, some words from scholars. So I remember I did this homosexuality thing. So the Quran itself calls men approaching men with lust instead of women. Nay, you are ignorant, which is a very strange insult because it's like, do you know what ignorant means? So where is it? Effeminate man. Yeah, so this is what Malik bin Athiya, based on his authority, Ali prescribed the following three punishments, and this is from the companions. A blow, deadly strike to the neck with a sword, and take whatever it takes. Thrown up a mountain with hands and feet, or burned with the fire. This is also in Al-Tahzib as well. And then Ibn Abbas stated that the punishment for the homosexual should be to look for the highest point in the city. Then he must be tied up and thrown from the top before he is stoned. Abu Bakr also had walls dropped on them. Then there's also like Shafi schools of thought, which state that both criminals involved in sodomy should be killed, whether married or unmarried. So there's the Sunni Shafi code, which states that the commission of sodomy and basad is an act equivalent to zina. And
now I got a question, Moose.
Yeah.
If I may ask, how would this gentleman know if a married couple is going through sodomy?
I don't know. You need 4 witnesses.
What's he do?
According to
what's he doing?
4 witnesses, by the way.
So they're going to kill someone for public indecency rather than sodomy itself, because like unless this guy's peeking at their washroom, there's no way he would figure that out.
Mind, you need 4 male witnesses or 8 female witnesses.
What in the orgy porn fuck is that? Like,
it's weird, I know. In the Hanafi school, back to the Hanafi, the culprit of homosexuality or sodomy should be punished with the circumstance of the crime. They seem to have the punishment, but it's less than an adulterer. The Maliki says he should be stoned. Then we have the Hanbali school, which condemns it. It's stoned and it has a straight up death sentence. The Jafari also has a death sentence. There are lashings. We even discussed Dahiriya briefly too, I remember. Even there's a Kuwaiti scholar, he said that anyone caught committing sodomy, kill both the sodomizer and the sodomized. The clerics determined how the homosexual should be killed. He should be stoned to death. So even Ayatollah Sistani, he stated that it's not permissible for a man to look at another man, and then homosexuality is haram. Sistani states it's forbidden for a female to engage in a sexual act. Even masturbation is forbidden too. Literally, masturbation itself, which is a sexual act, is forbidden. So this, and then there's plenty of countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia that has, legal systems that punish homosexuality. So I don't know what this guy is smoking, but I might want some of that stuff. Whatever this guy is smoking. So far, he's made some claims that are not Islamically correct. So, and then he asks a question. Next question: why is
to be again, I do know that I'm just
Of
I
course,
know
you
I'm
don't do
playing devil's
that.
advocate
Of
here,
course,
and I
of
don't
course
even.
you are.
But the thing is, doesn't every this is obviously Muslims for
Yeah,
progressive values. Of course, he's some sort of modernist Muslim that argues this. He isn't going to care about what these older
yeah,
traditionalists have for ideas. He has his own interpretation of
yeah.
Islam.
But keep in mind, when he's making the claim jurists did not or scholars did not address this issue, no, they did. They actually did. So it's like, where are you coming up with this from?
Yes,
Like, they
they
did
did.
address the issue. So it's not like they
But it's again, he can wheeze himself out and say, "Oh, but I don't consider him true scholars
yeah, he can weasel himself
of
out of this. Yeah,
my true interpretation of Islam."
yeah, exactly. And then he made,
I actually have less of a problem with these progressive people. Sure, they aren't really believers, and there is a lot
yeah,
of hypocrisy
and there's a
in
lot of like
doing what they are doing. But
inconsistencies too. Yeah,
this is a sign of reform. This is a sign that Islam is slowly actually
Mhm.
moving in the direction that Christianity has
Yeah,
been
it
moving.
is. At the same time, it's like at least back your claims up, or don't make false claims. Um, you know, it's
I can agree
yeah, at least back it up with
with
some.
that.
Yeah, at least back it up. Okay, rules about sex and gender can be used to keep men in position of power and over women. This I agree with. Rules about sexual are often bent to benefit men rather than staying true to rule as it is in the man. But even the Quranic rules did benefit men. So what are you talking about? For example, in many Islamic cultures, when women have sex with men for marriage, it brings shame to their families because zina is a crime. It is considered a crime. No similar shame is brought to a man's family if he has sex before the marriage. No, they're both stoned to death. They're stoned to death. The Quran doesn't make any distinction of sin. Of course, he goes there. Two people involved, though. When the rule was bring more shame and harsh punishments, it means women have a lot to lose if they have sex before marriage, while men do not face this. The rule works to control women, but allows men to do what they wish. I don't know what his point was with this. Okay, let's read the next. Another reason sex is a hot topic amongst Muslims. Yeah, he doesn't address this fact. A hot topic has to do with politics. Many Islamic countries were colonized by non-Muslim European countries. Of course, he's gonna pull the. Oh dear, Jenny, help me with this. He's gonna pull the European colonial card. The colonial rulers replace Islamic legal systems with your. Yeah, you were saying. Yeah,
I mean, it's actually pretty interesting when this is kind of besides the point, because I think this is a very complex issue with hasn't direct lines. But there is actually a discussion when people that came from the Ottoman Empire
yeah.
and traveled to the France, and this is the
No, no,
18th century.
this is from
So
the
this is far back. This is before the French
yeah,
Revolution.
yeah.
But they comment on how stuck up the Europeans are about sexuality.
I think one of the sultans, he did decriminalize it in the mid 1800s. There was a sultan who did that. However, this was the Ottomans formed in the 1400s, 1300s, 1500s. So it was still homosexuality was still seen as a criminal act. Um, and so you can't completely blame colonialism for that. Plus, places like Iran,
No.
for example, were not colonized. Iran had both the Safavid and the Qajar, as well as multiple empires in the middle, like Iran itself or Persia, and then you also had some Arabian kingdoms. They weren't necessarily colonized per se. The
No. And this is why I think that this is a
Yeah.
lot more complex than just blaming
Exactly.
colonialism for
because
this.
the regions that were,
Conservatism.
I would say, most effective, like again, India was for sure colonized, and it had both Muslim regions as well as Hindu regions. India itself. So I know he can argue that it had an effect on the Indian Muslims for sure, or the Pakistani Muslims, but not so much the Arab or Iranian Muslims or Turkish Muslims, because this was the region of the Ottomans. So I wouldn't blame
Yes.
European colonialism. So
Or it was, I mean, the inside the Arabic Peninsula, they never, got into it and colonized the inside. They only colonized, the coast in
exactly,
certain cities, the Portuguese and
and the British Empire, East India Company, the
yeah,
Dutch,
yeah.
because
But they never got into the Arabic Peninsula. That remained,
yeah,
untouched by European colonialism directly. Though
yes,
indirectly, of course, it had effects and such. But this also pisses me off, because this is an example of where what I think is, the new post-colonialist view set that is completely Eurocentric, because it believes that everything that happens in the world happens due to Europe and their colonialism,
yeah,
as if these cultures that are around the world couldn't have their own values or their own ideas, and everything must just be a reaction to the West.
yeah. I've seen this, especially in academia. I've seen this
Oh, it's
where
very common, which
yeah,
is scary. And
it's like
these are the same people that would preach against, so quote unquote, racism.
yeah, it's like why are you blaming everything on colonialism when in reality many of the rules or many of the issues already did exist in set cultures, especially Islamic cultures or the Islamic world, for example. Um,
Yeah, let me bring up the example, like the colonialized Hindu view on this, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I'll put up the article when I can find it, but I've actually read that this, and I've actually visited the temple because it's from my hometown in India. So in the Chola dynasty's temples, now if you go to temples in South India,
yeah,
where I'm from, they invented the Kama Sutra. Sex is and LGBTQ is just a part of life there,
yeah,
right? So it's and if you go to the temples, like next to like the food, like next to like the livestock, so on the top of the temple, it's common to like write like the societal topics, right, via
yeah.
hieroglyphs and pictures. If you ever see the
Yes,
sculptures
yes,
on
I've
the
seen
top of the
those.
temple,
Yes, yes, I've
yeah,
seen those.
so it'll have pictures of like livestock activity, the kings and everything, and they'll commonly have LGBTQ or such on there like regularly. The issue is, and let's say if you're having like a special event like Diwali or like the equivalent of our mitzvah or bar mitzvah and such, and someone from the community actually comes in, it's actually considered auspicious, and they'll be considered like they're the ones that are supposed to have the event be done on their own hands. Your child's considered blessed by God themselves.
Yes,
Especially like Lord Shiva is all commonly shown as a transgender person.
yes, yeah,
Now that changed starting 1817. The 1870 until temples that were built by the the Indian priests and such,
hmm,
pre-Islamic invasion, so 1250, the
yeah,
first invasion of Islam.
yes,
Temples commonly had this practice, so they always wrote it. So saying that Hindu priests did not write stuff down is a misdemeanor of the facts. They did write it down. It was just burnt down during Muslim invasions. But whatever texts we have left commonly show if, let's say, a transgender person does visit your festival, they're allowed to bless it,
yeah,
and they're supposed to bless it. And it was here and there until like 1857 when the British came,
well,
but it
they
started to
don't,
diminish during 1250.
yeah, yeah, because the British already came in the 1700s.
Yeah,
It was from Buxar, that is.
yeah,
1857 was more like the Indian Revolt, the European Indian Revolt.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I know with Hinduism, yeah, they can make the claim that they can make that claim that European colonialism or colonialism ruined their culture. They can make that claim. But when he's making the claim like Muslims were affected by that, not necessarily, because only Indian Muslims seem to have that issue, because we already did have the Safavid or Qajar empires as well as the Ottoman status. So they were powerful empires, and the British or Europeans could not penetrate them. And so his view seems very subcontinental or South Asian centric, very South Asian centric.
It could also be that he, generalizes also, because he comes from, maybe I'm just reading this, that
Yes.
he might come from, this very progressive academic background where this is standard to blame everything on Europe and the West, and thus he just does it by, default without thinking about it. It must not necessarily have to do with him coming from Southeast Asia.
Yeah, and because the reason I say South Asia is because when he says, even after colonial rulers left, many Muslims felt their way of life was threatened. This was true of Indian Muslims. This was very true, which led to the form of Pakistan, like formation of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Some Muslims who immigrate to the US or other Western countries also feared their culture would be lost in their new country, which is mostly, I've seen true, or studies have shown, is mostly the case of South Asian Muslims. So he seems more South Asian centric in this regard. Because I've seen like culturally Iranian Muslims and Arab Muslims from different countries like Syria, Iraq, and Jordan and Lebanon have very different adaptations or very different thinking.
Yeah, but that's also because I think to Canada and Britain there is a different kind of immigration from the Arab world than it is to Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Sweden, I can tell you that we do get a lot of immigrants that really want to keep the culture and keep.
Which I've seen that. And when people, like he states, when people feel threatened and fearful, they often try to keep control in whatever way they can. And I'm guessing this is the case in Sweden. He says here, limiting sex and women's rights can seem like easy ways to feel more in control. Yeah, it's also a mechanism of keeping others in control. So, he's not necessarily wrong, but yeah, it's it's a bit like he's by default blaming colonialism. Now, chapter 2,
and I think that's bullshit, considering that there does exist traditions within Islam that are clearly against homosexuality.
Absolutely. He thanks the generous contribution. So he says, does the Quran talk about sexuality? Not exactly. Sexuality is a modern concept. The Quran refers to sex acts. Prophet Muhammad, and early scholars also talked about sexual acts and desire. Yes, they did. Our classical scholars did not talk about the difference between sexual acts and identity. No, they did actually. They actually did. They, what do you call it? The jurists, especially, they did talk about sodomy. They did talk about issues like I showed earlier. They did talk about homosexuality and sodomy. That is. So that's not necessarily completely, Yeah. Anyway, is there a difference between sex and sexuality? Yes, and it's an important difference. Sex refers to sex acts. Sexuality has to do with feelings of desire and in the way a person relates to other people, correct? As well as actual sex acts. So sex may be part of sexuality, but sexuality is much more than sex. Oh boy, I hate this example. For example, if a woman is raped, she has sex, a sexual act occurs to her body against her will. Rape does not have anything to do with her sexuality. The sex act of rape is not related to her desire or identity. And this is true in the case of a victim of rape is male as well. Though funny, he doesn't mention like the rape of the rape of many women in Islam. But anyway, because slaves, that is rape in essence, because the slaves have no choice. But yeah, I'm kind of diverging here.
Oh God, this reminds me of about another discussion I once had.
Yeah.
Where all right, I did. That was very. It was kind of being an edgelord, because I really was against him. Where I kind of argued it was about moralizing history, and I kind of argued that this was what happened during those times in war, and applying our ideas about rape and such to that isn't really anything but anachronistic. And I said, and also technically, rape is a legal term.
Oh boy.
If there is no law.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was a very edgy thing to say, because I was getting tired of. Yeah.
Yeah.
This reminds me of that.
Oh my goodness, man, you had a very interesting life, didn't you?
I've had very interesting discussions. But that was one of those discussions where I'm less proud of myself, because I really lost my own temper.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like when it comes to rape and the apologetics regarding that. One, I haven't heard it, but I could see it, that some Muslims would say, "Oh, but that wasn't rape because it happened in a context where there didn't exist those laws." Yeah, but you are also the one that claims that we should live after this example right now.
Yeah.
My issue isn't actually with Muhammad and what he did during that time, because I don't moralize history like that. But the problem is, you take history and you moralize it into our world.
Yeah. And this person is seen as an example. So, it's and his companions as well, too. His companions, his family are seen as excellent examples of morality. So, to basically, having this as normalized, like slavery and rape, it's like, well, this happened. Well, I mean, not that this happened. Like this is wrong. Like this is actually wrong. We have grown to realize this is wrong, but your God didn't. So it baffles me. It says here, sometimes a man has a desire for other men but does not have sex with them. His sexuality includes, yeah, he's correct on this, even if his behavior does not include the sex act. So yeah, he kind of, what do you call it, clear difference between them. I feel like he could have used the better example from the first one. Anyway, again, I just personally don't like topics of like sexual assault and stuff, because I don't necessarily dislike them. I just Anyway, I'm a bit sensitive. Anyway, could sexual diversity be part of God's plan? Yes. All right. The Quran celebrates diversity. He's talking about sexual diversity. It even protects diversity of religion. Okay, you're going off of the topic. We're not talking about diversity of religion. We're talking about sexual diversity. By instructing Muslims to protect other religious groups such as
But
Jews.
don't you realize that every diversity is the same? It's about minorities. It's about protection.
Quiet, Jinny. Quiet.
Being tolerant.
Quiet, Jinny.
Sorry. I couldn't resist.
But yeah, it's by instructing Muslims to protect other religions such as Jews living under Muslim rule. Or it does talk about the jizya, which in itself is a big can of rabbit hole, and in the sense that you are paying protection money. So it's like you're kind of a mafia group that is policing the other group. So you're not exactly like, it's not exactly diversity. You're just in power. There's a strict hierarchy. The Quran says that human appearance, culture, language, and even religion.
Wait till you will hear the edgelord libertarian take.
Oh no, what's the edgelord libertarian take?
That a Muslim could use. But when you say that the jizya is theft or protection money, isn't every tax that?
Oh, I hate that argument. Okay, yeah, and
I'm not. Yeah,
you have.
Yes, I agree.
I know, it's like you have limitations on how much tax you can apply, number one. Number two, it's not based off of beliefs. And also, the jizya itself was a separate tax on top, because there was a land tax, the jizya tax itself. Yes,
The
so
kharaj,
these were
yeah.
two separate taxes. And
Yes.
the jizya,
And there was also the trade and production ushur tax.
Mhm. So there were different forms of these taxes, and jizya was only for non-Muslims. And what do you call it? The jizya, if you weren't able to pay,
It's also very funny that you mentioned these taxes.
well, yeah, because a lot of these taxes people don't talk about, because when they say jizya, it's like, oh, it's the same as tax. No, we're different form of tax. I've read the English translation of the tax. I don't remember the Arabic names, but you did have and like with these tax, they
The
did
three
have,
taxes that usually applied to non-Muslims
uh-huh.
were jizya, kharaj, and ushur. But kharaj also became applied to Muslims later because you were forced to, because the tax base would have been too small otherwise and too decentralized. And you also had two diwanan, or two administrations for the taxes that were collected upon certain Muslims with regard to the Kharaj tax, but also on all the non-Muslims. That went to the central state. And every tax that was, with the zakah and the like, was administered by local mosque congregations and their leadership in the Abbasid Caliphate, which meant that the centralized authority got poorer and poorer in regards, in comparison to the leaders of the provinces, which also,
it created some problems,
exacerbated the decline of the Abbasids, and and also helped in various provinces easier being able to rise in rebellion and break off.
What they forget about zakat and all these taxes is that you're not supposed to be humiliated, because a non-Muslim is supposed to go walk, get down on their knees, be pulled by the beard, slapped, and then told to pay the jizya. So the humiliation process, and not only that, there was no upper limit on the jizya. And the jizya itself, if you failed to pay, your wives and children could be sold to slavery in order to pay up for the jizya.
Yes.
So it's the many things that they forget, that these are the points that make jizya very deplorable and very extortion, practically extortion, masquerading as a tax, as the Massar puts it. But yeah, it's.
On the other hand, it should be put in context. I will actually defend the system when it was, created, because it was better than just straight up saying, all right, now you convert or we cut off your heads, because that was the standard in the Byzantine Empire in Europe for most of Europe's history.
Yeah, though keep in mind, this tax was an option. Getting, what do you call it, punished if you didn't pay said taxes or convert. So these were still the three options. It just added a third option, so to speak.
Yeah.
It just,
but it's better than, I still think it was more flexible than just convert or die.
Yeah, it's more flexible, but it's like, but it's still effective. I kind of noticed it's still very effective, because it still helps with the conversions.
But it also, kind of.
Yeah,
but it undermined also the authority of the caliphs due to how the system was set up. It did, because the tax base converted.
Yeah, and not only that, like you became a second-class citizen still. For people of that time, I feel like they were like, hey, at least we're alive, So must have what they thought at the time. So I kind of see where you're. One can make that argument, but yeah, it's is again very marginal, very minorly better. I would say slightly, like by a pin or something. Like just another.
I mean, it was still considered good enough for a lot of the Christian sects that existed within the Roman Empire to turn upon the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, since the Byzantines would just have straight up murdered them or tortured them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's why they preferred this option, because it was just the next, I would say, the least worst option, the least, So it was very interesting. By the way, back to the article, because I know we diverge a lot. The Quran says a variety of human appearance, culture, language, every religion, even religion, were created by God's divine. He should mention these Quranic verses. He finally mentions 30:22. He says, "We know homosexuality exists among Muslims with free will. It also exists among animals." And Quran says animals do not have free will, but they do. They are only obedient to God, but they do have free will. In the Quran, Surah Al-Rum says God created his humans with different alwan, a word that can be used both. Yeah, the colors and tastes. I've read this one. The colors and tastes. Though the color, one can argue, can be applied to skin color as well. Human beings certainly have different tastes in many things, including sexuality. It seems like he ignores what do you call it? He kind of ignores that it's not necessarily talking about sexual diversity. It's just talking about diversity of races, that is, or like different size of people.
Yes.
Different, so it's not necessarily that. So I feel like this is kind of drives the point mute. Okay, Surat Al-Nur, he quotes something. Men who are not in need of okay, let's see this verse 24:31 to 33. Men in not need, he claims, might have been gay or asexual. By the definition, they were not homo. They were judged they're not judged or condemned anywhere. Okay, he makes this interesting claim 24:31 to 33. All right, let's open the Quran.
Let me look it up.
Yeah, I'll just show the Quran itself too. So I'll show it on the screen. So he makes a very interesting, okay, like we have 24, chapter 24. So verse 31. Okay, let's see. The believing women should lower their gaze and they should guard their chastity and not display their adornment except what is apparent of it. And then let them draw their head covers. It's talking about head covers over their bosoms and not display their adornment except to their husbands or their fathers or fathers of husbands or their sons or sons of their husbands or their brothers, blah, 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 or sisters, or possess their right hand slaves or attendants who having no physical or children or who are not aware of private aspects of women, and not let them stamp their feet to make known what they conceal of their adornments. They can't show their adornments. Again, that's what the corpus says. The Daryabadi says Shirlur and guard the private parts. So they sort of say private parts in Sahih International and Daryabadi. Okay, it's talking about private parts. Let's see the next one. And marry the single among you and the righteous among your male slaves and your female slaves. If they are poor, Allah will enrich them from His bounty. Allah is all-encompassing, all-knowing. 24:33. So it hasn't talked about those males yet that he claims. And let the chaste and let be chaste those who do not find any means for marriage until Allah enriches them from. So it also says, and for those who do not find the means to marry shall restrain themselves until Allah enriches. So it's just those who haven't married yet. or did not find a way to marry or means to marry, that is, or did not have enough money to get married. Doesn't talk about men who have no desire. So it doesn't talk about asexual men either. So I don't know what the hell he's on about in this. From among those right hand
Nope.
possess.
It doesn't.
Yeah. So this was a straight up lie. Constrain not era and harlotry, if they would live chastity, whosoever will constrain them. So this is where the fuck does he come with these claims from? Like, where the fuck? Also, Nick had to bounce off because his internet was weird. But yeah, it's so far this was just a straight up lie that about the asexual men. They're not, or not like they're not gay men. It's just they're not men in not need of women. It's just men who do not have the means to marry, and usually it's because they didn't have enough money to do so. But Allah will enrich him with his grace. Like, usually it says Allah will reward him, like he should refrain from having sex. So Allah will reward him either by bounty, by like any means, which is a future wife or, slave status. So it was such a bullshit claim, this one. Does Islam say anything specifically about homosexuality? No. What? Where does he come up with this from? First of all, we cannot say Islam says or the Islamic law says because only people speak. Dude, jurists scholars have addressed this issue. What are you talking about? Islam itself cannot say anything. Huh? So where can we look for answers? We can look in the Quran, which is the basis of Islam. The Quran does not even mention the word homosexuality. You idiot. This man is an idiot. It talks about men who lust after men. Doesn't need the word homosexuality. What is this guy? It does not refer to gays, lesbians, or bisexuals. What? In fact, howlers had to come up with the term homosexuality in Arabic. They come with, is this true? Al-shudud al-jinsi. The phrase that means sexually rare or unusual. The Quran mentioned homosexual by name, scholars would have simply used the term. No, they did use the term, and they did, what the people of Lot did. So it's like, it does not address the issue of bisexuals for sure, but it does address the issue in the story of Lot, that is. So especially like men who lust after men, 2755, I believe. So as well as like chapters 11. Let me see, what verses did I have saved? Whoops. So like it does, and in chapter 11 as well, chapter 15 as well too. They kind of hinted at this as well. They were hinting at this, and this was mentioned in previous biblical texts too about Sodom and Gomorrah. So this guy's just being like ignorant of the issue. So did the Prophet know of any kinds of sexual or gender diversity? He says, yes, there were men in Arab society at the time of Prophet who fit the Quranic description of men who are not in need. Where did he just made that up. Man just made that up. A detailed study of the early Islam also showed the Prophet accepted men called mukhannath. Mukhannath were men who were seen as acting like women. Okay, so there's a
feminized,
the effeminate. They might be considered transgender today, or might have been gay men whose sexual orientation was seen as them making them like women. The Prophet Muhammad seemed to recognize these men for different. His wife Salma had a mukhannath friend named Hit. Unlike other men, Hit was allowed to enter both men and women. Muhammad even trusted the mukhannath, even enough to let him enter the private space. Actually, let me also share a hadith which talks about being trans, that is. 1 second. So he's not necessarily wrong about the guy, the servant. So Salma did have a servant. Actually, where was this? Was this here? Yeah, so he mentions this hadith. Cursed is the man who dressed like a woman, and cursed is the woman dressed like a man. This is from Sunan Abu Dawud. Some of these hadiths have been removed.
المسترجلة.
What's that term?
المسترجلة.
Yeah.
It's the woman that acts like a man.
Yeah. Okay. So here it says, cursed is the man who dressed like a woman, and cursed is the woman dressed like a man. Or even in another hadith I saw, which was regarding behavior. Wait, share screen. Which was, where is it? Yeah. No, not this one. Not this one. Crap. I'm all over the place. I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry for this. Oh, was it Salma? Yeah, there was something with Salma. Yeah, so in Bukhari 772, 774, he says the Prophet cursed effeminate men, those men who are in the similitude mannerisms of women, and those women who assume the manners of men. And he said, turn them out of your houses. The Prophet turned such and such man, and Umar turned out such and such. They were banished. They were turned out of the houses. So that was the example. Yeah, I can't find the hadith about the helper. Oh, yeah. Tomorrow. Yeah, basically what Hit did is see this 4324, Bukhari 4324. I found the hadith. I had saved it. Finally, found the hadith. So Bukhari 4324 says, the Prophet came to me while there was an effeminate man sitting with me. And I heard him saying to Abdullah bin Abi Umayyah, "O Allah, see if Allah make you conquer Taif tomorrow, and then take the daughter of Ghailan in marriage, for she is beautiful and fat, as she shows 4 folds of flesh when facing you, and 8 when she turns her back." The Prophet then said, these effeminate men should not enter upon you, O women. Ibn Juraj said the effeminate man was called Hit. So yeah, so this particular person, because he said something about someone, so that's why Muhammad turned this guy away. So this article is like missing all these facts, all these like little stories. So he kind of ignores some of the details. Did the Prophet ever punish anyone for homosexuality or homosexual acts? Oh boy, no.
Oh God.
Oh no. He's gonna lie here again. After Muhammad died, his companions once discussed whether to punish a person for homosexuality. If the Prophet had ever done so, his companions would have simply referred to his decision. Since they didn't know what to do, we know the Prophet gave them no example to follow. He could make an argument from there. In the case of Hit, Salma's Muhannath, Muhammad did punish him in a way, but not for his sexuality. But he did say, drive out these effeminate men. And he did say, drive them out of their houses. Muhammad found out that he did prescribe a woman's body to him. He didn't prescribe, he just said you should marry so-and-so, which he could do because he was able to. At that point, Muhammad told his wife not to allow Hit to enter women's quarters. However, Muhammad did not criticize Hit for his sexuality as for acting like, no, he did say these effeminate men. He also cursed people for being effeminate or women acting like men. So there are punishments by his companions as well too. Like I showed earlier with Ali, stating the 3 punishments, or even Ibn Abbas stating the punishments, what Muhammad recommended the punishment is. So this is just a straight up lie. As I think there is call it, in Sunan Abu Dawud, it's Hassan Sahih. If you find anyone, Muhammad said this, if you find anyone doing as Lot's people did, kill the one who does it and the one whom it is done. Even though this is Hassan Sahih, this is second highest in grading. So this is pretty strong as a hadith, very strong. And you also have, there was another, Ibn Abbas, yeah. Like he said, the punishment for homosexuals should be the highest, thrown off the highest point. So this was a straight up lie from this guy.
Again, I think he will ignore every hadith that says against his view.
He can make the argument that the Quran does not outline a punishment. That argument would have been stronger, though, at least in my view. That argument, however, one can challenge saying, but God did punish them, though, like with raining stones, that is. So one can counter that by saying it. However, he can say, oh, God punished them for other sins, blah, blah, blah. That could be a separate discussion.
Oh, here comes the funny thing. When they speak about, doesn't the Quran say that homosexuality is unnatural? Sure, the Quran never uses the word unnatural, and that is a European way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it does see it as a sin.
Yes, it does see it as a sin. Now, it doesn't necessarily say it's unnatural. It sees it as a sin. And it calls the people ignorant. It calls the people, it curses them. You are, what do you call it? The people of Lot being punished. So forth. So it does. So he's incorrect with this. He's not necessarily complete. He's twisting the words around, He's twisting. Yeah. He's saying it. He ignores that it's a sin. Are there words used in the Quran to talk about sexual behavior that is not allowed? Yes, there are a few. Jenny, you might know this. Fahisha, the term. Fahisha. It's a word used.
Plural. Fawahish.
Fawahish. Okay. It's a word used doing something
for obscene acts.
Right.
Obscenity.
Yes, for obscene acts. Then zina, yes, it means transgression. Adultery. The word fisk or fusuk means corruption. Fiska. They are used to describe the state of mind someone is doing is not allowed. In other words, someone who is committing fahisha. Some scholars try to connect fahisha, fisk, and homosexuality. However, this connection is not clear from the Quran. It's kind of clear. There's men lusting after men. Yeah, some scholars also try to connect zina and homosexuality by saying homosexuality is like adultery. The problem is that this connection does not exist in the Quran. The Quran simply doesn't say that. Human jurists are the ones who say that there's, oh my goodness. That's a straight up lie, because it does see it as a sin. So it's like, where are you coming up, bro? Where are you coming up with this from, bro? So the Quran only talks about heterosexual relationships. Does that mean everyone should be heterosexual? Oh no. Why does he say not necessarily? That's a very neutral answer, isn't it? The Quran assumes heterosexuality is the most common kind of sex and discusses heterosexual terms in detail. However, just because something is unusual doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. Huh? Quran refers to people who are where? It doesn't refer to people who are intersex, those with signs of being both male, and that is not a common. Where? Say the verse. Where is it? I couldn't find a single verse.
I mean, one thing I will say about this person is that I don't think he is he is an apologist, but he isn't an apologist that is trying to hide, Islam's, homophobia in the same way that a traditionalist would, in order to, appear more moderate than he really is. In this case, I think that this person genuinely is progressive.
Yeah, though he's hiding a lot of things, and that
Yeah, no, yeah, I think he's just ignoring things rather than hiding them.
Right.
I don't think he's hiding them like,
Yeah.
some of the other that actually believes in, the homophobic parts or, the parts against various things in the Quran.
Yeah.
But, he's not doing this out of, some sort of
Malice or anything.
malice.
Yeah.
No, he's
No.
doing this because he is progressive and
No.
tries to, he tries to get the cube through this.
Yeah.
The cube through the circle.
Yeah. Like we already mentioned, what do you call it? There's no mention of intersex. And then we also said men in having no need of women. You and I, we discussed it. It's like the verse doesn't say that. The verse actually only talks about men unable to marry in 24:33. So that's like a straight up, like he's just inserting his own translation there. Now let's go to the story of Lot. Finally, he's addressing the story of Lot. Now he says, wasn't the story of Prophet Lot clearly about homosexuality? He's like, not exactly. The story of Prophet Lut, called Lot in English, can be read in Oh no. What where is he coming up with this from? Like, and now he's gonna go on.
I mean, I actually kind of, I'm a little bit more sympathetic towards him than you are, because I think that he's just desperately trying to fit, his progressive values inside Islam, and this is like progressive, modern, 21st century thinking meets 17th century thinking from, Arabia.
Yeah, though keep in mind, the focus of the story was the homosexuality, because in 1178 and 1571, Lot offers his daughters, just like in Genesis chapter 19, he offers his daughters to the gang instead of, angels. Because he says, what do you call it? These are my daughters, they are
Yes.
pure for you. So the issue was the homosexuality. It wasn't assault or rape or anything else. It was the homosexuality. That was the issue.
Yeah, I do think though that the reason that a daughter was sacrificed like
Because to protect the angel, yeah, you can
has
make
less
that
to do
argument.
with the entire thing about homosexuality. I make the argument that this story in its original form has more to do with sacred hospitality
It does,
and
but
promoting that value.
Yeah, but keep in mind, like he's not only that, Lot lies to the crowd too. Like he says, "Oh, they're virgins," but then turns out they have husbands too. So it is such a messy story. It's a disgusting story.
But I do think that it's just a case of blue and orange morality back then.
Now, keep in mind, this is from a god, like, so we can't argue like, oh, blue and orange, like all.
No, but I'm trying to place it in the historic context, what the thinking was back in, because this is from the Old Testament.
Oh, from the Old Testament, yeah. And keep in mind,
yeah, because this is a borrowed story from there, and it does have this idea from the start, I think, in order to glorify sacred hospitality.
And a lot of like apologists I've noticed say, oh, they were offered in marriage, but there were only two of them, and this was an entire gang.
This is actually quite similar to another story, because I actually did some digging. There is an old Akkadian story.
Yeah.
But there he sacrifices, instead of his daughter, his son, to be beaten to death.
Right. Like, yeah, and it goes to show, like,
hospitality of someone that comes and visits you was a very important thing back then.
Yeah, but keep in mind, even though it was all the hospitality, he's like, it's better for you to do them. It's like, it's better for you. So the sin of homosexuality.
Yes, because the guest must be protected.
And not
yes,
only
because the guest is more important than the children.
Yeah, though one can
because you need to keep your honor by defending them, as they are coming to you and your domain.
Yeah, and which is very messed up way to, more morally speaking at least, a very messed up way to look at it. A very messed up way.
Yes, it is messed up with our values, but
Oh no,
my entire thing here is that I think that the main point here wasn't actually the homosexuality of it plays a part here. It's obviously against that, but I don't think the main thrust of this entire story was ever about their sexuality so much as it was about hospitality.
No, it was about sexuality, because the main sin was that they were committing sodomy, right? That was the main sin. That the people.
I think the main thrust is here is that they want to commit it upon some unwilling
Keep in mind, like
persons.
I read the story where the people of Lot would also engage in this a lot as well too. They would engage.
Yes, I'm not saying that it isn't against homosexual acts, as that's the problem. What here, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the main
You're cutting out
thrust of the main theme of this story wasn't actually about the homosexuality. It was actually about these are people that want to do bad thing to you, and in this case, it just happens to be homosexuality.
Yeah.
They want to do bad thing to your guest, so you need to protect your guest.
Yeah, and
so it's better that you sacrifice your daughter.
Yeah, and surprisingly, it's the gang of rapists who are like, the gay rapists are like, no, we don't want your daughters. So it's so that was the thrust. It was like their desire for the male flesh instead of the female. Share screen. Where were we? Let me just get back to the article. So yeah, he says that it can be understood in different ways. Yeah, protect the honor of the guest. Also, like it was about homosexuality. That was also the key thing, and it has been used by scholars, by people, to discriminate against them.
I agree. It's that it doesn't really work because the main and one of the main parts of this story is that they want to do homosexual acts.
Mm-hmm. And the people were known to commit those. That is,
yes. And that's one of the main parts. And they want to rape the guests, the homosexual.
Like he can make a stronger point. He can make a stronger point. It was about sexual assault. Like he would have made a point, but I think he might make that point later. But let's see what he says, because he could make that argument. He says because here I noticed that he deflects the issue. He's like, it can be read in different ways, and then someone asks, "Isn't there only one way to read the Quran?" No, there are several ways to read the Quran. Kind of a slight deflection. People can read it literally, using word to word, semantically, linking words' meaning in the sentence or in places of the Quran. You can also read it thematically, the whole passage. Yeah, this is not necessarily wrong. Why not just read the Quran literally? And keep in mind, it's like, that's a good question. Why not just read it literally? Isn't this supposed to be the literal word of a god, right?
I'm actually quite surprised that he doesn't make the death of the author argument here.
Yeah, it's because it's
there are endless amounts of interpretations of a
text. Yeah. Because that assumes the death of the author argument. Yeah. And it's like, wait, isn't God your author? Is he dead? What are you talking about?
He isn't going that far, but I'm surprised he didn't.
Yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't gone, because and reading the Quran literally is not as simple as it sounds. It can lead to misunderstanding the Quran. Sometimes it's just confusing. For example, the word hot, like he gives these examples, the hot mean. So I find like this is kind of a waste of time. This entire thing is a waste of time. To make things even more complicated, because he should have used examples from the Quran itself rather than other examples. So it's like, this is kind of like this, this is what frustrates me about certain apologetics. It's like, use examples from the Quran, not other examples like a hot and English language or something like that. He says, to make things even more complicated, meanings can change over time. Many years now, some might read it and think that actor is hot and assume that it's a high body temperature. I mean, yeah, except then isn't that a book for all times? And also, since the word homosexual do not appear, we must read it in a different way if we want to find out that the Quran tells. But it does describe the act. This guy, he ignores the fact that it describes the act. Men lasting after men, it describes it. We insist on the Quran that we can only say the word homosexual doesn't appear in the Quran, therefore it tells us nothing about the subject. And then he talks about semantic reading. You got the different words. I find like this is he's kind of wasting time here. I do want to skip to the crux of the thematic readings. I'm just taking a look at it. Thematic new way of reading actually. Okay. Now he says, do semantic and thematic readings reveal anything about why the people of Lot or Lut were punished? He's like, yes, in the story, first advised the city of Sodom to follow, but they ignored. Later, the men of Sodom threatened to rape Lot. Okay, he finally makes this point. This could be a stronger point. Who were angels disguised as men. God then punished. However, like I stated, he ignores, if it was about rape, he ignores that the daughters were offered. So rape the daughters instead of the men. So it's like, yeah, they clearly, like, rape wasn't the issue. It was
Again, I don't think that condones rape. I think it's more you need to prioritize your guest above your own family.
You can make that the priority, but also it's like it's he also says like they're better for you, like the women, like I showed in the verses. Some scholars interpret transgression as the story of Lut for the male, yet the word transgression can mean something sexual or something non-sexual. Is this true though? Transgression. But it was saying men lasting after men, so it did specify it. So it's like, very like, this guy's like just, I don't know what fallacy it is, but it's like, he's playing around with the semantics. Men are not the only ones punished in the destruction of Sodom. Whole city was destroyed. Lut's wife and other were punished. The wife was punished because there was a story. The wife was a different story. She looked back when the city was being destroyed, and she turned into a pillar of salt. So the wife, and in the Quran, like, she remained behind. That is, so that was just the punishment. A thematic reading of the story can be found in Qasas al-Anbiya, the classical verse story written by a scholar Muhammad. Oh, okay, he's going to use another text. But somehow that's part of Islam. Ooh. Puts the strange behavior in the context makes sense. Sodom had taken a showing in the city's dominance by raping strangers. If it was about rape, why are you, like, offering your daughters? Asshole. They were showing that they could take what they wanted from others, like, stinginess and greed, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so he's making that entire argument. And it's like, was the behavior of men of Sodom an expression of sexual desire? How is this not? How is it not? The Quran says Sodom wanted to have sex with the visitor. Is an example of rape. It's not an example of sexual. Rape is about power. I mean, yeah, you can make that argument. It is about coercing, yeah. So power. But they did sexually desire them, though. They did, because they were like, we want to get to know. So they did desire them. So I'm like, not completely right.
This idea that rape isn't about desire. I mean, rape can result from several factors.
Exactly.
This idea that it's just only about one thing.
Yeah.
Just because they did a study which saw a correlation between one certain type of study, it doesn't invalidate the fact that there can exist several factors that lead to rape, several reasons for a perpetrator to do it.
Especially the perpetrator does indeed, in many cases, desire the woman, especially, and then there are different forms, like, again, because rape by simple definition is not consensual. The other partner did not consent to this act, and you took advantage of them. whether the partner's knocked out, whether the partner's sleeping, whether the partner was, bound. Like the desire is there. Like one can even act on desire as well. Is there any other reason to think that this is the correct way to understand this? So it's like, yes, in two hadiths, Prophet Muhammad, there is support for this understanding. The Prophet asked the archangel why Lut was Jibril, responded they did not clean themselves after using the bathroom or having sex. They had not shared the food, and they were covetous, wanting things belong to others. And in another hadith, asked for the penalty of stinginess, a story of Lot. So, but he doesn't quote these hadiths. Like, I don't get find the reference. Give a reference of this hadith, professor. Like, aren't you an academic?
You should know that you need to have your references.
Right? Especially if you're an academic.
I mean, even since I can, even if I can't quote directly in my videos here on YouTube, I at least publish the sources that I use.
Exactly. Man should be at least publishing it
in the description of my videos.
Yeah, or at least like
this guy doesn't even do that.
He had a citation.
Or does he? I haven't seen.
Yeah, because at least there's a citation where you can click on it and then it can take you to the citation. I would have at least respected that. Based on this reading, what should Muslims take as lesson? Based on the reading, again, you had the argument of the hospitality. So hospitality and protection of people who are vulnerable, avoid sinning, condemn rape. This is where it gets weak because it's like, you just offer to your daughters to get raped. Uphold and respect relationships. Now, this question asks, is it right to treat homosexuality as a had crime in Islam? Now, what is a had crime? A had crime is where a person breaks the rule that is clearly described in the Quran and has a clear punishment. For example, Quran mentions adultery and gives a clear punishment. The only had crimes are meant robbery and false accusation of adultery. So yeah, there is. I did mention this earlier. Like, he is kind of correct. Homosexuality does not have a clear punishment in the Quran. However, it has punishments in jurisprudence and Sunnah. So it does, so you can't ignore that. But definitely he can make the argument Quran doesn't have any punishment. Why do some scholars say that homosexuality between men is a had crime? So they're drawing an analogy between zina and homosexuality. However, this analogy is not clear. More about this in the topic in his book. Okay, so he makes that claim. But then most scholars do agree that it's punishable. Because there is a clear punishment.
More about this can be found in my book.
Yeah, it's like,
I mean, this almost feels like a commercial.
I know.
Almost.
It feels like a commercial.
More information.
Yeah.
In my book.
Yeah. Yeah. I might do a review of the book later on. I really wanted this guy on, but like I think he just rejected it, and so he did not want to come.
I mean, you did have that other, progressive Muslim guy before, and I think that some, of our viewers are all awesome, and I will say that the viewers here on this show are awesome. But some of the people there could be a little bit
intimidated,
confrontative, should I say?
I would say also a lot of Muslim guests
questioning.
Muslim guests might be intimidated because they're facing an opposition. That is, it's like meeting a lot of critics, right? So I think the intimidation factor could be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so does homicide meet the requirements? He says no. When trial had crime to be homicide, they reduce homicide down to anal sex between men. This does not. No, but there are. I did mention hadith. Like if a man, let me show you the hadith. What do you call it? Let me show you the hadith because there is hadith on this. I think it was this one. No. This one, I believe. So there's a hadith that says, a man should not look at the private parts of another man, and a woman should not look at the private parts of another woman. A man should not lie with another man without wearing lower garment under one cover, and a woman should not lie with another woman without wearing lower garment under one cover. So this one is clearly stating that, don't put yourselves in a position where you can have sex, and then there is Sunnah Abu Dawood, like I stated earlier, a man should not 4008, a man should not lie with another woman, or a woman should not lie with another woman without covering their private parts. So that is that hadith exists. So I don't know what this guy is on. So it's not necessarily just anal sex. Even exposing your parts is, forbidden. Even exposing your parts, or even looking at the other parts. So it hasn't been reduced to anal sex. So he's completely wrong here. So, he goes on this with lesbian and bisexual do not have anal sex between men, but it's the point renders the point mute. He's like, do
major schools of Islamic thought agree about whether anal sex between men is a had crime. This one is going to be interesting. No, several schools of Islamic thought do say that it's a had crime, but Hanafi and Zahiri jurists do not. I mean, I think it's interesting that they mentioned the Zahiri school, because that school, sure, it still exists, but it's almost extinct.
Yeah, it's almost.
And it's kind of like saying, "Oh, mainstream Christianity," and then we will talk about the Amish.
Yeah, the Amish. It's like, what? What you're mentioning now? They're not the common.
The reason for the Zahiri lack here could be that they are very strict when it comes to the hadiths. And the definitions about separating them from the Quran, and then you could make an argument that since they are hyper literalists, I mean even more than the Hanbalis, then you could say that since only explicitly in the Quran, then it's not a had crime, because the had hudud are just those that are mentioned in the Quran. However, they still have a lot of other judicial rulings when it comes to things outside of the Quran, but in the Sunnah.
Yeah.
So, this isn't that easy to just say, no, they are fine with it. They are just saying that it's immoral.
Yeah.
No, they aren't really.
Yeah, they do have punishments, and they do prescribe certain punishments. However, Hanafi,
they're just not had crime. Hudud among the hudud crime. They are not among the hududs, but they are still crimes of other orders.
Mm-hmm. And the crime in itself is just less severe than adultery in the Hanafi school, at least. It's seen as less severe than zina. Yet they insisted.
Yes, because it's not. Traditionally, I think the Hanafis just whipped you.
No, with Hanafi,
they didn't stone you.
Yeah. There's the whipping. I think banishment. Maybe some imprisonment. I'm not 100% sure, because I have to look into it again. Maybe some imprisonment. But yeah, definitely something less severe than stoning. Two hadiths say that unjust suppression had punishment, something is not a had crime. Okay. So in the Islamic schools of thought that say homosexuality is a had crime, what punishment do they believe is correct? Stoning, because the analogy they're making between homosexuality, stoning, and also there's also the punishment of with taking them on the top and throwing. But generally speaking, yeah, he's correct. Generally it's stoning. So was this punishment used by the Prophet Muhammad? He's like, no. He never described it as a crime. He never punished it. Yeah. No. There were people, like he did punish people. It's not like
This is not my expert area, but
his especially he did drive them out. He drove them out. There's hadith. He drove them out.
so misleading when it says that it's not among the hudud, these things about homosexuality. Sure, it isn't about those things, but those are the only jara'im or crimes that exist in Islamic law. There exist lesser crimes.
Yeah. Now, evolving Islamic thinking of homosexual, which has led Muslims to be the homosexual. There is some people feel homosexual because of personal prejudice. The motivating factor is that they believe in their belief system. If someone is heterosexual, only knows heterosexual, they may feel they're not naturally without knowing. This is a factor for sure. Prejudice against homosexuality may also come from sexism. They believe that homo didn't exist until Europeans and Americans, right? They feel it is a kind of corruption that came from outside the Islamic culture. Which is
on this point, I've actually experienced with people that think like this, but it's obviously wrong when you read the
Because in the Islamic world, at least, like not the Islamic religion, we're talking about the Islamic world. It did exist.
Yeah.
Islamic world. Again, we're separating the two. And there is poetry.
Do you know what I think is kind of funny?
Yeah.
Because, parallel to Islam in the Arabic world, there's always been a, very long tradition of Arabic poetry.
Yeah.
In the Arab world. And some of that poetry is like filled with references to homosexuality and outright homosexual acts.
Yeah.
In graphic detail.
Yes. And then there's something about
you even have the Sihaki. Poetry, which is less Yuri.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting because boy love, I've seen also these themes of boy love as well. Like,
yeah, that exists too.
Yeah, and I was like, ooh.
Abu Nuwas was kind of famous for doing that as well.
And they definitely.
But he did everything.
Yeah.
And believe me, boy love was the least of the problems with his poetry. I will not describe what he described. That was way.
Yeah.
More because I don't think that this episode will be able to stay up if I do.
Yeah. But let's move on. Like I think we're just sort of towards the end of the time. Let's wrap this up, or try to wrap this up at least. Belief that homosexuality is wrong from trying to read the Quran literally as the story of Lot, but some people feel that homosexuality is wrong because early Muslim scholars concluded it was. Later scholars often simply refer back to the same rulings. That way, conclusions made certain by human scholars are reinforced. Oh, of course, he's going to use the human scholars argument now. Continue to follow that they were God's absolute truth. Man, why does sexism make people believe homosexuality is wrong? Someone believes men should act certain ways and women should act certain ways. These different rules of men in power. Sexism makes these men as weak. I mean, yeah, this is another issue altogether. Was homosexuality Europeans? Okay, there we go. Was homosexuality introduced to Islamic culture? No. Records showed sexual diversity in Islamic. Yes. Here you are correct. It did exist in Islamic civilization. Now, if you made the argument it was in Islamic civilizations, that would have been a better argument. In fact, for a long time, Christians used this against Muslims, calling them permissive, meaning too liberal and sodomitical. This, I think, you also kind of refer to the Ottomans, where they saw that the
but yeah, that was late. But this is actually for most of history, Europe was a lot less permissible when it came to anything that related to homosexuality than the Islamic world was, considering that the Islamic world allowed, in the Arab world at least, allowed it in poetry, and it continued also into Persian and
Especially in
poetry.
especially like I would say even later Abbasid or like post Abbasid as well. Like it was a very different.
Yeah, it continued for a very long time, even up to very late. But for the Europeans, this was just. And then you also have things. There was a friend of mine, and he got into a very scuffle that was, and I had to save him because I got angry with the other dude because the other dude was kind of. Anyway, there is in Arab culture, in certain of the Arab countries, you kiss people when you meet them on the cheek.
Yes.
And he did this because it's normal way to greet people. But the other guy was a Swedish guy.
Yeah.
And he got totally terrified because, you don't do this.
Yes, in Sweden, this is not like. Even when I visited Iraq and Iran too, like Iraq especially, one would when we shake hands, the cheek kissing was very common, and when we meet Arabs, even
even in pre-Christian times, those acts like kissing the cheeks were seen as being agir or homosexuality that was punishable by death in traditional Germanic law.
Yeah,
and this is pre-Christian law.
Whereas in the Arab world, this was was seen as very normal greeting. That is like the kissing on the cheek. And even today, like I shook someone's hand, and gentleman, like he placed his cheek against my cheek and made the kissing sound on the other cheek too. So it was, it was a very.
The Romans and the Greeks had their, permissibility about homosexuality, but that disappeared when they converted to Christianity. But I think the really thing that really made Europe different is that the northern cultures, like both the Slavic and the Germanic cultures, and all were very against homosexuality, even in their pagan origins. And this really, hyper, led into some very extreme expressions of it.
Yeah.
Later, because you every little, even the most innocent of acts, could be considered, homosexual.
Yeah, and it was.
You don't see the same thing in the Arab world historically ever.
Even like modern, like even one can even. Two men can hold hands, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're romantically inclined. In Iran as well too.
Yeah, but that's the entire thing. I would argue that had he argued that, for example, the Islamic world has not been more intolerant historically than the Western world, I would kind of agree, but I would still say that both have been very intolerant. But that's kind of like you're comparing yourself. You are a bad example of tolerance when you're comparing yourself to the worst example.
Yeah, and let's and now he's asked, is it Islamic law the word of God? And he says no. It was constructed by early Muslims and based on the Quran, Hadith, stories of Prophet Muhammad. I mean, to an extent, if it's in the Quran and the Hadith, isn't it supposed to be from your Prophet and God? And the decisions of early caliphs, rulers, Islamic law are based on culture norms, secular ideas that existed before Islam, which is not necessarily wrong. They're not necessarily patriarchal, but even certain pagan ideas did influence it, certain laws, and continue through the present day.
The history of the origins of the Sharia, or rather the thick traditions of interpreting it, is vast.
And it gets complex. That one gets complex as well.
I mean, even you could argue even that when it comes to now, I'm going to speak about land use effect law and connected to awqaf
Yeah.
in the form of land, then it becomes very complex because you can actually argue that certain laws can even be traced back to the laws of Hammurabi.
But yes. So these laws could be very old themselves too, like practically like.
Now this is land law because that's my field of expertise when it comes to
Yeah.
Islamic legal history.
Yeah, but one can actually, it can be a very interesting topic on its own. Isn't Islamic law, okay, so to learn more about these, we read this book. So he's advertising. Isn't Islamic law something that never changes? He's like, no, these are considered.
There isn't a Islamic law. There are several traditions of Islamic law.
And then there's 5
And those are the traditions of law. These aren't even the finalized law codes.
Yeah. And
because every school has several law codes that came out of it for several areas, which are also different from each other. I mean, for example, the Maliki school of thought that was used in, for example, Morocco isn't going to be the same that was used in Mali in the finalized law that they brought forward to be applied.
Yeah. Okay. Here's he's using these examples. Muslims once assumed the Quran demanded the Muslims be ruled by a monarch, even though it does not say so in the Quran, which is interesting. Muslims once thought that slavery was part of Islam, and that the Quran emphasized free. No, but it still has the slavery. That is, there's still it doesn't.
I mean, slavery is obvious.
Is it what? Sorry?
Okay, but when it comes to monarchy, of course they are against mulk or kingship dominion.
Yeah,
but kingship is bad. Kingship because it's hereditary rule. That's in the Islamic tradition. It happened, and caliphs were in practice monarchs. But just like in the case of the Roman emperors who were in practice monarchs, they weren't in theory monarchs. Because they were in theory subjects of other institutions and forces.
Yeah. Also, read this last interesting. Many Muslims have assumed that women are inferior to men, despite the Quran verses. Oh my goodness, no! I'll give this guy a few examples. Quran 2:282, which says a woman.
These are just cliche, progressive.
Yeah, it's like
this is just cliche, progressive Islamic propaganda.
Yeah, because it's like chapter 4, verses 7-11, literally state that the daughter gets half of the inheritance from the sons. You could beat your wife. 424, female sex slaves. And then, you have and 434's interpretation states that it, even the modern Sayyid Hussein Nasr state, this confirms the authority of a man over a woman. So there is no empowerment here. So this guy, like you said, this is just dumb propaganda right here. So finally, in each case, Islamic law is evolved. So this was a straight up lie. Sometimes he straight up lied. Can I accept someone's yes in Islam?
Can we look at the notes? I'm interested in seeing the notes just below.
Pronunciation is key for English.
All right, here is the terms, but go down after it, because I'm interested to see if he has any sources down under these terms.
Gender-related terms. Actually, he just defines these terms. Different readings of the text. Other terms. He just says about Dr. Siraj al-Google. Like he said, he just wrote these articles.
All right.
No sources.
All right. So he didn't provide any, sources. Oh.
Yeah, just on his website.
Because I wanted to just make sure. Because I didn't want to, say that he didn't provide anything before.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if I could retract that statement.
No.
Yeah, because I don't want to say, he hasn't cited any sources, and then he has had some sort of system down where he says, for these things that I said about regarding DC.
Okay, Okay, let's see. Proceed. See his website. Hang on. Let me just stop.
Because it's important to be charitable and not say things that aren't
Hang
true.
on. Let me share the screen for his website. Scott Kugel. This is the guy. Oh, hey, a white guy. So definitely he's. I can't find any sources of the faculty. It's just the page from the Emory College of Arts. Where's the information?
Yeah,
I thought I was expecting some like.
it's none. You know, one thing.
This is annoying.
Yeah,
This was interesting episode. Very interesting episode. But yeah, what are your
Sure
overall
was.
thoughts, Culture Jimmy?
I mean, it's obvious that he was wrong in a lot of statements and that he ignores all of the traditional views or is very misleading when it comes to that.
Oh, very, very misleading.
But I do still think that this is probably just a progressive guy that, you know, tries to mix Islam with his own progressive values and make it into something sort of
something new and something better.
Something that he feels will work. But it's kind of like, you know, you're trying to put a square through a circle.
Yes, you
know those kids, those kid games where you try to put squares or various forms through various holes. And he's just trying to press down this
square.
Like
I remember you mentioned Christianity changed a lot too, and despite that, it's still becoming a bit more changing a lot of rules. You still have former Christians or Christians leaving the faith because even Haris Sultan says at the end of the day, it's a false ideology. It's a bogus ideology. And at the end of the day, it still has toxic elements, many toxic elements in it. The scripture, especially the scripture itself, the laws can change, but the scripture is just there, like practically reveals itself. So, I know he's going that direction, but we'll see. I mean, I hope this is the direction people take it, but at the same time, it's also like, don't delude yourself. Just leave the religion. Just leave any bogus ideology, please.
I wonder if this guy is originally a Westerner. He looked very Western.
Oh, he is a Westerner.
He looked very Western, so I wonder if...
Yeah, he is a Westerner, like from the website that I just opened.
Yeah. But I mean, again, people can look very,
True.
Western.
But yeah, his name's Scott Kugel, looks white. White dude.
Yeah, I would.
So anyway, thank you
that he's a convert that has converted to some sort of progressive Islam view.
Yeah, probably. And I think Nikhil tried to get a hold of him, but to no avail. But yeah, if we were having a discussion here, it would have been interesting to have him as a guest. But anyway, thank you so much for today, Culture Ginny. Thank you guys for joining. Nick had to drop out because of internet issues. And I think it's it's like, Nick, don't worry. Also for next week, Nick, hopefully we have Nader Ahmed coming on our channel. So Nader Ahmed as a guest. So there's going to be a discussion between him and Nader Ahmed. Yes. So on evolution. So we're going to see, based on science, that is, because Nick is also an expert on science. But we'll see who's, we're trying to find a very, very neutral moderator. So, what do you call it? If you're not so that he can make the claim, oh, it's just atheists all ganging up on me,
I mean, I think that when we have Muslims guests, we should play a bit with the silk gloves, because I think that it's still important to have a discussion, even if you have to hold back a bit.
Yeah. Like I would say,
And also, when it comes to certain edgelord atheist behavior, I mean, I like to play the devil's advocate, but I do know when to do it and when not to do it in certain
Yeah.
regards.
yeah, and then it's like you're, but then when you do it, it's like, God damn it, the devil's advocate is here again. But thank you so much, Culture Jani. We'll see what happens with Nader Ahmed next week. Hopefully, he makes it, and there's nothing that happens that to prevent him from coming. I'm happy he's willing to come. I'm very happy with that. And hopefully next Saturday, same time, 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Canadian time or Eastern time. That is Eastern Standard Time. Or East Coast time. I don't know. New York time. We'll say New York time. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I apologize. It was a bit boring because it doesn't have many videos to look at. But we were looking at an article, and it's like, sometimes academia can be a bit boring. But thank you so much for joining and tuning in to the Gin and Tonic, and have a nice day.
See ya.